It was a bitter cold winter. Ice and snow covered everything. There were no green leaves falling down from the treetops. There were no shoots of grass growing up from the earth. No flowers blooming. It was very, very cold. And the rabbit, in those days people called him Mahtigwess, was looking for something to eat. Mahtigwess went down to the lake shore where he saw a wigwam that belonged to Mr. Otter. Mr. Otter had built his wigwam right on the bank of the lake, and then he had packed the snow into a slippery slide that went from the front door of his wigwam right down into the cold, icy water of the lake. Mr. Otter would jump onto his slide and zip, slip right down into the icy water and swim all around until he had caught a big string full of fish. Then he would swim up to the top again, and he could cook the fish for his supper. When Mahtigwess the Rabbit saw this, he thought to himself, "Aha! If an otter can catch fish, so can a rabbit." He went right home, and he said to his grandmother, in those days Mahtigwess lived with his grandmother, Grandmother, let's move our wigwam down to the lake just like the otters." But the grandmother said,
Mahtigwess, I don't think that's a very good idea."
"Oh, grandmother, you are old," said Mahtigwess. "What do you know?" Mahtigwess, he would have his way. And so they moved their wigwam down to the bank of the lake. All afternoon, Mahtigwess worked very hard, packing the snow down into a slippery slide. He stomped the snow with his big hind feet. After he had finished packing the snow, he jumped onto his slide. Ooh, that was cold on his backside. He grabbed up his big hind feet, and he slipped right down the slide into the water. But Mahtigwess, being a rabbit, did not know how to swim, and he sank like a stone straight to the bottom. He probably would have drowned, except Mr. Otter came swimming by and scooped him up and carried him up to the top again, where Mahtigwess gasped and gulped for air. And Mr. Otter said to Grandmother, "Grandmother, what is Mahtigwess doing?" And the grandmother said,
Mahtigwess, he's seen somebody doing something, and he has to be just like them."
On another day, Mahtigwess went out to find food, and instead of going down to the lake, he went into the forest. There among the great trees of the forest, he saw big red-headed woodpeckers flying from tree to tree. They would perch on the side of a big tree trunk and then peck, 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 peck into the bark with their long, sharp beaks, pulling out little white worms to eat for their food. When Mahtigwess saw this, he thought to himself, "Aha! If woodpeckers can peck into a tree for worms, so can a rabbit." He went right home to his grandmother and he said, Grandmother, let's move our wigwam into the forest and live among the great trees like the woodpeckers." And the grandmother said,
Mahtigwess, I don't think that's a very good idea."
"Oh, grandmother, you are old. What do you know?" Mahtigwess would have his way. And so they packed up and moved their wigwam into the great forest to live among the trees. Now, if Mahtigwess was going to peck worms out of a tree trunk, he would need a long, sharp beak. So he found a stick and he sharpened it with his flint knife. He laid the stick on top of his head so that it pointed straight down from his nose, and he tied it in place with a piece of leather string. And then all afternoon he worked hard to climb into a tree, and then he began pecking into the tree with his pretend beak. But when he pecked, the stick snapped and stabbed him right in the eye. All the woodpeckers came flying to see what was happening, and they said, "Oh, Grandmother, what is Mahtigwess doing?" And Grandmother said,
Mahtigwess, he's seen somebody doing something, and he has to be just like them."
On a third day, Mahtigwess went out to find food, but this time he left the forest and he walked on a path high up onto the mountain, where he saw a dark cave, the home of the old she-bear. And when he looked in at the mouth of the cave, he saw the old she-bear preparing food for her children. She sat down on a big rock, hiked up her hind foot, and sliced a callus right off the bottom of her foot with her sharp knife. Then she plopped the meat into a pot of water, and it bubbled and boiled until soon there was enough meat cooked for all of her little ones. When Mahtigwess saw this, he thought to himself, "Aha! If a bear can slice a callus off her foot, so can a rabbit." He went right home and he said to his grandmother, "Grandmother, grandmother, let's move our house up onto the mountain. Let's live in a cave like the old she-bear." But grandmother said,
Mahtigwess, I don't think that's a very good idea.
"Oh, grandmother, you are old. What do you know?" Mahtigwess, he would have his way. And so they moved into a cave high on the mountain, just like the she-bear. And then Mahtigwess sat down on a big stone, he hiked up his hind foot, and using his sharp knife, he nearly cut his toes off. The big she-bear came running and said, "Oh, grandmother, grandmother, what is Mahtigwess doing?" And the grandmother said,
Mahtigwess, he has seen somebody doing something and he has to be just like them.
Mahtigwess cut himself so severely that it was many days before his foot was healed up. But finally, when he was better, the spring had come. Leaves were falling down from the treetops, grass was sprouting up from the earth, and flowers were blooming everywhere. There was plenty of food for rabbits. You will see Mahtigwess, even to this present day, hopping through the forest, eating the leaves and the grass shoots and the flowers. He's always hop, hop, hopping along, as if his hind foot hurts him a little. That's where he cut it with that sharp knife. But that's a good thing. It reminds him that an otter is an otter, a woodpecker is a woodpecker, a bear is a bear, and a rabbit is a rabbit.